Hey guys, Rick Taylor here with KS USA. Today we're going to talk about how to install your new LEV Integra seat post. Okay, so before we get started with our installation, let's talk about what comes with your new LEV seat post. The aftermarket version will come with the KG remote here. If you have an OEM version, like say with the build kit that might have come with your new bike, you may have the OEM version. The only difference between the two really is that the OEM version has a standard nylon clamp and it is not clamshell design. So you basically have to take the grip off the handlebar in order to install this one. If you have the aftermarket version, you'll have the KG remote, and that actually has a clamshell design, and it's also compatible with an ODI grip. So you can remove that inside lock-on collar off of your grip and put this in its place. Also included with your seat post is going to be a barrel adjuster noodle, cable end ferrules, your new LEV seat post, cable housing, and inner cable wire. Okay, next let's talk about some basic tools and supplies you're going to want to have on hand to install your LEV Integra seat post. First is going to be a lint-free cloth. Microfiber towels work very well. You can pick those up from any place from like the Home Depot or Costco to pretty much any supermarket or grocery store will have these. Lint-free is important because you don't want to contaminate anything with lint or fibers from the rag. Zip ties, again, any hardware store you can get these. A complete set of ball end Allen keys, metric size. Some masking tape for marking the height of your seat post. Carbon fiber grip. This is going to be used when we install the seat post in lieu of grease between the seat tube of your bicycle frame and the seat post. You don't want to use grease. It will cause it to slip. Carbon fiber prep you can get from pretty much any local bike shop. Or you can also order it online. The one we're using today is made by Finish Line. Brand doesn't really matter, just make sure that you get a good quality one to use. A pair of diagonal cutters or wire cutters. If you have a good pair of wire cutters, that's preferable, but a good sharp pair of diagonal cutters will also do the job. And then either a measuring stick or a measuring tape for measuring your seat height dimension. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do before we make any changes to the bike is we're going to take some measurements and mark our seat position and seat height on the existing bike. Now it's really important that you make sure that your seat angle and that your seat height is set up in the climb position where you normally would pedal to get maximum efficiency. If it's not currently in that position, I suggest to go out and ride the bike, get that set up right where you want it, and then come back and go ahead and get started. In our case here, this is already set up to our climb position, so we get full extension of the crank. Saddle is in the correct position for us to be centered over the crank. So now that we don't lose that setting when we put the new seat post on, we're going to make a few quick measurements and markings. First thing we're going to do is just go ahead and take a piece of tape, and we're going to put a piece of tape right here on the seat post to mark the amount of insertion in the frame. Now we're going to take two measurements. The first measurement is going to be from the seat collar, just the top of that, to the center of our seat rail. Now, if you're going to change the saddle at the same time you're changing the post, it might be advisable to measure all the way up to the top here, so when you put the new seat on, if the dimension from the rail to the top of the seat is different, you take that into account. In our case, we're going to go ahead and reuse this saddle, so we can just go ahead and measure from the top of the collar to the center of the seat rail, which is 170 millimeters. So we're going to write an S here, 170. Now the second measurement we're going to take is going to be from the top tube of our frame to the nose of our saddle. This will help us get the saddle inclination, or get the saddle as level as possible, back close to the original measurement. So if we measure there, to the bottom of the tip is 180. So we'll write 180. Now, you'll notice that this is a zero offset post that's on the bike. Because we're putting on the LEV Integra, which is also a zero offset, we're just going to go ahead and put a mark on both sides of the clamp. Now, the reason we're marking both sides is that the clamp shape might be slightly different on the LEV, so this gives us a center line point. So between those two dots is the center line of the original post. So when we put the new seat post on, we're going to line those two dots up with the center line of the KS post, and we should be pretty close. So we might be off by a millimeter or two, but this is going to give us a really close ballpark to get the initial setup. Okay, and one last note about your saddle position. If you're going to change the saddle, the overall length here might be different from your old saddle to new saddle. So in that case, instead of marking here, what you can do is take a measurement from the nose of your saddle to the center line on your steer tube, and that's going to give you that total distance. Make a marking of that distance, and that's going to help you get that set up very close to where you were with your original saddle. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and remove our original seat post from the bike. Set that aside. Then we're going to go ahead and start unrouting the cable into the frame. The different bikes are going to have different routing in the frame. In our case, the routing is through the head tube here. It actually routes down the down tube and then up the seat tube. So you're going to want to follow your frame manufacturer's instructions about routing. Some frames have an internal tube inside to route the housing. Some might even have a cable stop possibly. A lot of the frames today now have kind of a stop where this is all externally routed and then it goes into the frame down here somewhere in the down tube. So whatever the case, you're going to want to follow that frame manufacturer's instructions on routing. What's important here is this next portion of how much slack we want to set up for handlebar rotation and making sure we have enough slack cable so that when we need to take the seat post out for service, there's enough slack that we can go ahead and pull the post all the way up out of the frame. Okay, so as we discussed, there's a couple different remotes that are available, and this particular one happens to be an aftermarket offering. So we have the ODI clamshell style clamp. We're not using an ODI grip here, so this clamp profile will either go on your normal handlebar or it'll work on a lock-on grip. So depending on how you're setting your bike up, you can run it with or without. If you're running the OEM style, instead of just opening this clamp and slipping it over the handlebar, you're going to need to remove your grip. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and install this remote. And before you tighten it down, you definitely want to check this with your hand. Check for ergonomics. You want that so it's easily reached, but out of the way, so if you're operating your brake, you're not hitting the inside of your hand on the remote. When you get it to a position where it's comfortable, go ahead and snug that down to between 3 to 5 Newton meters. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is put our flex noodle in place. Okay, with our flex noodle in place, I'm going to go ahead and put the end ferrule on our cable. Push that down in place. Go ahead and assemble these together. Now we're going to just go ahead and push the cable in till we get the right amount of slack. Now, what's important is to test. You want to turn the handlebar all the way around and make sure that it doesn't bind up here or anywhere along the route. Okay, now we've fed the cable housing out of the seat tube as per the frame manufacturer's instructions, and then we just went and set up the front portion of the cable so it's in position. We know that the slack is correct and we're right where we need to be. Next thing we're going to want to do is go ahead and mark the location of this cable. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and mark right here at the collar with a piece of tape. Okay. Now that we've got that marked right at that position, we're going to go back to the front of the bike and we're going to go ahead and loosen up that remote and let the cable slack out. Okay, so we've got our cable housing marked here, and that's after we've routed the cable up on the handlebar. And now our next step is we've transferred the dimension from the center of our seat post clamp to where the old seat post fit in the frame, which in this case was 180 millimeters. We took a piece of tape and put a mark there. So the next step, we're going to go ahead and take the end cap, this is a protective end cap, off of the post and set it aside. Then we're going to go ahead and just feed our cable out of the frame a little bit. Make sure you don't push it too far and push the cable and the head tube out too far. But then the next step we're going to do is we're going to line this up with the mark we made. Come down here. I'm going to go ahead and cut the cable. Okay, then we're going to go ahead and install our end ferrule. And then the next step is we're going to go ahead and feed our cable through. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and feed our cable through. Pull it out. Next step is going to be to go ahead and put our cable coupler on. And this just slides down. There's a hole in the center here of the cable clamp. And then this is that plastic cap that came on the end of your post to protect it. There's actually a relief here that you set that into. Slide the coupler down to the top here. Go ahead and tighten that down until it just stays in place. Then you can remove this. Use 2 Allen wrenches. Tighten that down. And we're going to go ahead and cut the cable there. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and hook the cable up to the actuator. I'm going to make sure that this cable ferrule sits all the way in. Go ahead and tighten that down. Then go ahead and feed your cable in gently. You want to take the slack up on the way out of the handlebar. Go ahead and then line that up to your mark. Then we're going to tighten down the cable collar clamp to 6 Newton meters. Go ahead and tighten the clamp to about 4 to 5 Newton meters. And then check the function. If you need to, you want to take up any extra slack or play in the cable with the adjuster barrel here. And once you get the action so it feels good and there's no play in the lever, then go ahead and tighten that down. Give it a last check. You're good to go there. So we went ahead and slid our saddle on. You remember those marks that we made earlier? You want to go ahead and get those centered up. You can see we got the 2 marks there. As we discussed, the clamp style is a little different. So just line up the 2 center marks with the center line of the post. And that gets you into the right position there. Go ahead and alternate bolts as you tighten those. Last thing we'll do is check our measurement from the top tube to the nose and make sure that we're back on our measurement. Measurement on this bike was 180 millimeters, so we'll make sure from the tip down to the top tube is 180 millimeters. Once we get that, alternate the bolts, and you want to tighten these to right about 10 Newton meters. And then the last thing you want to do is before taking it out on a trail to ride, roll it around, ride the bike, make sure that the seat pops up and drops properly, that you don't have any resistance or problem with that. Also double check your cable routing, make sure it's not hanging up anywhere when you turn the handlebar lock to lock. And then the last thing is, after your first ride, come back and recheck both of these bolts. Sometimes depending on if it's a tubular or a carbon rail, things can seat in a little bit, and you want to make sure that you retighten these, retorque them to 10 Newton meters to make sure you don't have an issue with your saddle coming loose. Other than that, you're ready to go. Go out and enjoy it. Okay guys, that pretty much wraps up the installation of our LEV Integra seat post. If you have any questions, you can feel free to contact us at kssuspension.com. Thanks for watching.